It all began in 2007. Greg Hargrove and Jules Watsham, both former members of Iguana Entertainment, would work together to form Renegade Kid, their own independent gaming studio. They both would incorporate their expertise in N64 game development into their projects, many of which were aimed for the Nintendo DS. And while Renegade Kid developed less than 20 games during their 9-year lifespan, they obviously knew what they were doing, developing games like Mutant Mudds, Exeo Drifter, Moon Chronicles, and several prototypes that were extremely impressive for the hardware they were running on. But there were two games that stood out from the rest. These two games were known for their creepy atmosphere, its lo-fi horror, its first-person shooter mechanics, and its mature rating. And that was Renegade Kid's Dementium games. Horror games were few and far between on the Nintendo DS, and while there were a few of them, none of them ever quite attempted to pull off what Dementium did. Dementium started off as actually being a Silent Hill pitch, which Renegade Kid made to Konami. To which Konami told them to go screw themselves. The project would then become its own original IP, originally just going by the name of The Ward, before later being changed to Dementium. Oops. So without further ado, let's jump into this review.
Prepare for phase 1 of the operation. Mr. Redmore.
Are you pooping your pants yet? Alright, let's start with the first game. The first Dementium is the better known of the two, and was Renegade Kid's first game actually. Rated M for a
massive nipples.
Play the game as William, a man with amnesia who wakes up in an abandoned hospital, which you quickly discover is full of spooky monsters. After finding a notebook and a flashlight, our journey through this twisted hospital begins. In case you've never played a first-person shooter on a DS before, you use the stylus to look around and D buttons to move. It may sound a little weird, but it actually works really well. Far better than any PSP shooter did. Anyway, as we begin traversing this hospital, we'll quickly discover that the exit is padlocked shut, forcing us to have to progress down a different path. Soon after this, we'll end up finding our first weapon, which is a nightstick baton. The first Dementium is broken up across 16 chapters, and the game takes roughly 2.5 hours to complete. In terms of mechanics, the game feels like an odd blend between Doom 3 and the Silent Hill franchise. One aspect that Dementium really nails is its sense of isolation and horror, from the creepy sounds of the hospital to the slow piano melody to the sound cues of nearby monsters all add to an eerie experience. It doesn't help that you can only hold one item in your hand at a time, which means you will lose your source of light during any gunfights during the game. Speaking of weapons, you'll amass a small arsenal of weapons throughout the game. There's the melee baton, which absolutely sucks. A simple pistol which you pick up off a dead guy. A shotgun that is the strongest semi-automatic weapon, a bone saw which sounds like a dentist drill, a wind-up machine gun, a revolver, and a sniper rifle. The gunplay feels pretty decent, and trust me when I say, you'll need all of these, as the ward is full of dangerous monstrosities. First off, we have the chest mods, which are dangerous zombie-like creatures. Then we also have skitters and swarmers, which are two different bug types that are drawn to light, as well as these weird little worm creatures called molluscas. Then there's banshees, which are floating screaming heads, which are extremely annoying.
Shut up, bitch!
After that, there's the crawlers, which are... I don't really know what these are. Dementium has a good balance between its gameplay and its exploration. There are also a handful of puzzles to Dementium to solve, and while they're usually fairly simple, they do kind of add an interesting element to the game. And then finally, there are the bosses. The first boss of the game is the Cleaver, an enemy with a blade for one hand and a syringe for the other. The second boss is the Wheelchair Gunman.
Oh no, it's a vegetable.
Booyah. The other two bosses are a green room full of mollusca creatures and the Doctor himself, which is probably the hardest boss fight in the game, and the one responsible for this whole mess. Dementium the Ward is truly an impressive game, especially in terms of mechanics. but it has some serious issues with it as well. Like I mentioned earlier, the game is made up of 16 chapters, but Dementium really starts falling apart from the chapter 8 onward, with the level design taking a notable nosedive. There's also a couple of bad mechanics within the game, such as only being able to save your progress per chapter, as well as the map mechanic, where in every chapter of Dementium you'll have to find a new map for that floor. There's also the issue of enemies respawning whenever you exit a room, but the ammo and health doesn't, which makes backtracking an absolute pain in the butt. During the last 8 chapters, the game also reuses 2 of the boss fights, that being the cleaver and the vegetable boss fight. While doing some research on Dementium, I did learn that some of the content was shortened and cut due to time constraints. That might explain why the later half of the game feels so rushed. The last part of Dementium the Ward I want to talk about is its story.
Welcome to the Cum Zone.
The story of Dementium the Ward is kind of convoluted. Prior to the events of the game, William Redmore was married to a woman named Elizabeth and had a single daughter named Amanda, until one evening when police were called to the Redmore's household where William was found standing over his wife's dead body. Police shot and injured him, where he was then taken to Redmore Hospital, where he, along with several other patients, would be experimented on by the doctor and his subordinates. There are notes scattered around the first level, which gives us some context into the other patients here at this institute, all of them suffering from some form of a mental disorder. In the office where you find the bone saw, you also can find some notes written by one of the doctor's colleagues. And you know, honestly, the first Dementium doesn't really give us much more information than this. You were a guy who was falsely accused of killing his wife, only to be sent to a psych ward where you would then be experimented on by the crazy doctor, and the whole game took place in your head while in surgery. And this would be the cliffhanger ending we would be left with until its sequel came out. Dementium's fanbase would have to go for 3 years till Dementium 2's release, and the wait was well worth it. Dementium 2 is literally better in just about every way when compared to the original, fixing all the problems that the original suffered from while also introducing new mechanics that would fit very well into the game. Dementium 2 starts off very similar to the first game, having us once again take on the role of William Redmore, who this time wakes up in Brightmoor Hospital 5 weeks after his surgery.
Looks good.
Oh, thank you. From there, we are taken to our cell before we zone out and find ourselves in another realm of existence, where we quickly find our first weapon before being attacked by some chest maw enemies, and witness whatever this was. After witnessing that, we will then snap and be standing outside our cell, where we are quickly attacked by security guards, to which we must fend them off using our newly found shank weapon. Dementium 2 takes roughly around 3 hours to complete in just the main story alone. As for Dementium 2's gameplay, it is similar to the Ward with some very welcomed improvements. The first major improvement that Dementium 2 has is its environments, which put the original Dementium to shame. Dementium the Ward all took place in one hospital, while Dementium 2 has a variety of different environments, such as a prison, some outdoor snowy areas, abandoned mine shafts, industrial areas, and a handful of other places. The map design is also better, and we even have a map on the lower bottom of the screen under our health bar to make navigation easier. Aside from the level design improvements, the core mechanics are pretty similar to the Ward though. Puzzles also make a return in Dementium 2, and there are probably just as many of them as there were in the first game.
Oh boy.
Next, we have the combat, which is one of the best parts of Dementium 2. Surprisingly enough, very few weapons from the first game are actually reused here. We have our nifty little shank blade, a 6-shot snub-nose revolver, a shotgun, which is one of my favorite weapons to this game, an assault rifle, a stronger dagger that we only have for a very small amount of time within the game, the bone saw, which has been completely nerfed, a boomerang key, a sledgehammer that has a cool wind-up feature, a flamethrower, which looks pretty cool, sticks of dynamite, and a nail gun, which I somehow overlooked in my first playthrough. Oops! Another cool feature of Dementium 2's combat is that you can now crouch, jump, and reload your weapon, which really helps improve the combat and also makes it a bit more challenging, as you must manually reload your weapons. This also allows you to take cover when enemies are shooting at you, and you also can jump over certain enemies' attacks. Unlike the first Dementium, you can also carry health and ammunition in your inventory for whenever you need them. So now that we've covered covered the weapons and shooting mechanics, let's talk about the enemies. The enemy roster to Dementium 2 is nearly twice the size of the original Dementium. The first actual enemies the game throws at us are chest moths, though they look different than they did in the ward and are more slow and clumsy. Then there are security guards, which are human enemies that guard the prison. Molluscas, which are nasty baby worm creatures, along with swarmers and skitter enemies. Lost souls are ghost-like entities which will lock you in a room full of enemies if you get too close to them. Banshees also make a return from the first game, as well as whalers, which are a different version of them that will spit goo at you. Then there are spitters, which are creepy, giggling enemies that roll around. Slime mines are mobile enemies that will block your path and will explode when shot at. Aerial hunters are flying enemies with bone saws attached to them that will drop molluscas when they die. And then there are reanimators, which are enemies that will come back to life unless you kill them with a flamethrower. And then finally, there are the bosses. The first boss you go up against is the Gnaw, a spindly creature that crawls around on the ceiling and will attack you with his blade-like arms. The Wendigo Witch is the second boss of the game, and attacks you by hiding in the shadows and jumping out when you least expect it. Then we have the Gorgamesh, which is less of a boss and more of an overpowered enemy, which you will face a couple different times throughout the game. Then there's Colossus, a giant gluttonous monster that you defeat by throwing sticks of dynamite into it. The final boss of the game is actually not the Doctor, but rather a giant worm-like creature called the Malotesta, which can only be defeated by being shot in the mouth. Honestly, Dementium 2 is a great experience. The game runs flawlessly, it looks great, it has voice acting, and the soundtrack works really well for it too. Though because I like complaining, let's talk about the issues. First off, Dementium 2 is pretty hard, especially if you're playing on the medium difficulty, and depending on the difficulty you play on will affect how many bullets it takes to drop an enemy. Ammo and health at times are extremely sparse throughout the campaign in certain areas, so when playing on a harder difficulty, this can make combat a lot more challenging. There's also the issue where multiple times throughout the campaign you will be locked into a certain area or room and will not be able to leave it until you take down all the enemies. And this happens a lot. And while Dementium 2 has a pretty good soundtrack to it, whenever you are in combat or have enemies nearby, the game will play the exact same melody over and over again until all the enemies are dead. One of the best mechanics that was introduced in Dementium 2 was the survival mode, which allows you to use all the weapons from the main campaign and fight off waves of enemies, which really adds a nice layer of replayability to this game. One thing about Dementium 2 that kinda disappointed me was actually its ending. Throughout the whole game, we traverse many horrors and pursue the Doctor to stop him and the monsters coming through another realm of existence. Yet, even though we defeat the final boss and do everything we were supposed to, we are merely left with this abrupt ending scene. Yeah, Dementium 2 ends on an abrupt, unexplained cliffhanger, which, to this day, there has never been a conclusive end to this series. Dementium the Ward would get remastered for the 3DS and later on home consoles too, while Dementium 2 would get an entire remake for the PC. But in my opinion, I feel like the DS versions of these games are always going to be the best ones. There's just a certain charm to these games that I feel like the newer, more modern looking versions don't have. At the end of the day, both of the Dementium games are extremely impressive for the time they came out at, especially Dementium 2. However, they are a little expensive. But...
Piracy!